Today's collectible spot, we are having a look at the Sideshow Collectibles Star Wars C3PO 6-scale figure. C3PO is a perfect accompanying piece to if you've already picked up the R2-D2, and he comes packaged in the same similar box artwork, box coloring I should say, as the other Sideshow collectible pieces. So grays on the sides, that middle area being black, and then the character featured on the front. For your side, the C3PO is also depicted here. Different pose, but still showing the lovable robot featured, at least of the figure, of what he's going to look like inside. Box art on the back, same idea. Down below you've got www.sideshow.com. And lastly, just before we get this opened up, the whole side here is magnetized as we've seen with other 6-scale releases. And on the inside, no real read-up, but you have Star Wars C3PO on the one side, the figure on the other. That being said, Spot's going to take himself a break. Going to get this opened up, and when we come back, we're going to get a better look at the Sideshow Collectibles Star Wars C3PO 6-scale figure. Some more heading your way, guys. Don't go anywhere. Stay tuned. And just before we have a look at C3PO, we'll first have a look at the hexagonal display stand that comes included with the figure. The default stands that seem to come with all the Sideshow collectible releases, whether it be the Hoth Luke, the Scout Trooper, I'm trying to think of the other ones that we've had a look at on this channel. They pretty much all come with this same sort of display stand. Yes, it's varied by the extra pieces that they've attached onto them, but primarily they've all reverted back to the hexagonal stand. C3PO doesn't have anything on it or doesn't come with anything that attaches to the sides of it. Instead, resorting back to just, again, the default black stand. The stand does have an adjustable clip at the top there, depending on how you want to display the figure. He seems to stand just fine on his own, and I may not even incorporate the stand when displaying him, because I'll be likely displaying him along with his friend R2. Now let's have a look at the figure itself, and it's really good. I think Sideshow has done a great job on C3PO here. He is featured here in all gold coloring. That's not 100% true. The one area that he does not have gold is on the one leg, which has now been opted instead for a slightly silver, although it does have a little bit of that gold color, but mostly a silver color. There's little areas of dirt at the bottom of his legs. Ideally, it could have been from, him being on Tatooine, some of that sand that has scuffed his armor. The figure, though, looks great. The mid area here, which as like in the movie, you can see all the little circuits and components that make up the interior of C3PO. There's a closer look at the circuits, just all the multiple different wires. Spin around the back of the figure there. You can see a lot more here on the back too. All the little individual wires that would have been the interior of our favorite robot. The figure is not very heavy, whereas like the majority of C3PO is basically just plastic. It does equate to being a lighter figure. Sure, die-cast would have been a really cool option. Having this guy in metal would have been a really cool option, but ultimately getting him in plastic form, I think, is still a good way to go for C3PO. I mean, R2-D2 was also released in plastic. Maybe down the road they might look to get these guys released in metal. That would be certainly cool, but in the meantime, though, he really looks good, though, even if he's comprised of plastic. Now getting a closer look at C3PO's head. It does look like C3PO. There's no denying that. Now, he does have light-ups. He has light-up areas in his eyes, and because he has a light-up area in his eyes, ultimately you can't really see his, if you want to call them pupils, you can't really see his pupils until you light the whole area of his eyes up. I've mentioned this before when it comes to light-up characters, light-up 6-scale figures, and C3PO I think is one I would want to mention as well. you're not always going to have him lit up. You're not always going to be turning him on and then leaving him in the display case or cabinet with the eyes always lit up. Obviously, you probably, like myself, will take batteries out because there's always that potential down the road that, you know, the batteries may potentially leak and damage the figure. So a lot of times what I do after Spot finishes reviewing these figures, I usually take the batteries right out. And that way I don't accidentally forget that they're in there. And then ultimately, not to say that it's always the case, but there's always that risk down the road that batteries could be leaking inside and damage the figure, or damage the circuitry, or damage anything that would have caused the figure to require the batteries in the first place. So a lot of times I will take them out. That being said, unless you're displaying him always with the lights on in his eyes, you don't really see his pupils all that much. And you can't take the faceplate off, and I'll show you how to turn the batteries on, or turn the light feature on, and how to change out the batteries in a second. But if this plate had only been able to pop off the front faceplate, and they had given you replacement eyes that would give you the idea that the eyes were lit up, that would be kind of cool, and a good way around not always needing the batteries to be on to appreciate the figure itself. You know, again, this could just popped off, and they could have just given you just the extra discs somehow, that you could have popped these discs out in the eyes themselves and replaced them with ones that looked as if the eyes were actually lit up. Possibly something that they could look at down the road as a way around not always having to have the eyes light. So to access C3PO's eye, at least eye area, essentially the eyes are always going to be on. And the only reason why they're not currently on, I'm going to go ahead and just pop the head off. One area that I don't like doing, just pop the head off. I'll leave the body right there for a second. When you get them out of packaging, let's bring the camera back a little bit. When you get them out of packaging, the batteries are already in C3PO. You can see them right there. The only thing that's preventing the light up feature from not working is by having this tab, this little obstruction of power, blocking the batteries. Once you pull those out, the eyes will light up, but they won't light up until you touch the top of his head. And let's see, we go here. There we go. It's actually just touching the front there rather than the top. And you can see how the eyes light up. That serves as only the on and off portion of the figure itself. So you can easily just, you know, accidentally bang it, and you know, that's how you would turn it on and off. Maybe you can see what I'm talking about here. There's the eyes lit up. You can finally see the pupils. But if they had taken the faceplate somehow as an available option to take this off, maybe even just completely replace two different front faceplates. One faceplate as an option could have had this, there we go, could have had this light up look without using the actual lights. And then if you wanted to have it as the real light up, swap it back to this, swap it back out to this, and then you could then turn it on and off to have real lights working. But there's how the on and off portion of C3PO, I should say, of how his head lights up. Now don't get me wrong, I do love how he looks. The only downside though is once again relying on the batteries all the time to give this robot his personality, because as it always will be, his head will be turned off till you turn it back on again. And then that's when you can really appreciate C3PO. That's my only nitpick I could possibly make about this 6-scale figure. This, I wish, could have been something that you could always have seen the eyes light up, but other than that, I really love this figure. Now, I'm sure one pairing that you'd like to see have with C3PO, and that's his little friend R2-D2. So we can just bring in the Sideshow Collectibles R2-D2, and obviously the two go perfectly together. I don't have R2-D2 with the lights on currently, so those could work as well, but ultimately I just take the batteries completely out just because I don't want to run the risk of having them damaged. And then we can go ahead and, depending on how you want to have them displayed, I probably will have Probably have them displayed kind of like that. C3PO and his buddy R2-D2 side by side. For C3PO's accessories, they will include the following. C3PO does come with his microphone that he communicates with Luke Skywalker in the Death Star. 3PO! It's not bad in the way of paint. Basically just black and white. You can see the microphone on the top part of there as well. And you can have him displayed holding it also. As you will probably see though, getting him to hold the mic can be a little bit more difficult. Each of his knuckles, and I'll show you this when we look at his posability, but each of his finger knuckles, as well as thumb, are independently hinged. So you have to kind of fold the fingers and thumb around the microphone to get C3PO to properly hold it. C3PO also comes with 2 restraining cogs. The cogs are magnetic, so they attach or stick to each other very easily. To attach it to C3PO, on the other hand, best thing to do is line it up, and there's an area right there. Line it up to the area where the oil is starting to trickle out from his chest. As you can see, like lining it up anywhere else doesn't seem to attach the cog until you line it up right to that area. And attaching it in place, you can have them displayed as just prior to Luke's uncle buying the droids. The only other accessory that would have come included with C3PO if you got yourself the Sideshow exclusive, there was also a secondary arm that could pop off, and you could replace it with a damaged arm. Like this whole, basically this whole arm here would be completely gone. The shoulder, I believe, was still present, and then you had the circuitry sticking out from the arm. I would never really display C3PO, to be honest, with a damaged arm, as really R2-D2 doesn't really look like he's damaged at all, other than just have some wear and tear, that I would just likely display him like that. When it comes to C3PO's posability, his head is on a ball joint. It rotates forward and back. And sometimes while you're moving the head, and actually if you wanted to know the on and off switch, I was pressing the front, the on and off switch is actually at the back here. That triggers the on and off for the lights. The head is on a ball joint. Shoulders rotate, like the whole arm itself rotates, and you have to be really careful with C3PO. He's got all these individual pulleys and pistons, but they don't really actually move in the sense that you can't get a full range of motion as much as you might think you can. There is this little hinge that rotates or slides back and forth that if I can move the arm ever so slightly, you can see how that moves back and forth. But these are very, very sensitive, and you only have so much of that clearance. You've only really got about that much clearance on the outside arm and on the inside forearm that allows arms to rotate back and forth. And through that, you probably will see one thing. These tend to want to pop off from time to time. So be a little careful when it comes to moving his arms. Don't move them too much. And what I might ultimately do, this one that keeps popping off, I just might glue that into place, because that won't impact the motion of his arms. It just simply is a case that it's popped off of the actual bicep piston area there. The top torso is on a ball joint. And I think really when displaying C3PO, I probably will have his torso kind of arched more so. He's always seems like somebody who never stands straight up. He's always got some sort of extreme gesture in his actual abdomen area. The lower abdomen, if you want to call it that, is on its own ball joint also. Legs rotate. Now, in order to rotate them, you might want to just slide these legs out just a little bit to get a clearance going. They don't move back and forth very much. They hinge out ever so slightly, and the culprit really just being the large leg panel that's attached to the thigh. Your knees hinge forward and back. Again, like, you got to be really careful. These little pistons here, really, really careful. They aren't attached, luckily, at least on the lower leg. They're not like the arms. They are separate from one another. They just give you the idea that they are attached, which is one thing that's at least good. And then as for your feet are on a ball joint. There is no additional posability in the mid or the toe area of C3PO. Not that he really would anyways, because after all, he is a robot. My personal favorite has always been R2-D2, but I mean, the duo could not be complete, obviously, without C3PO. Sideshow Collectibles did a really great job on the figure. There's a few little hiccups. Sensitivity, of course, when moving the arms, you got to be careful about moving those. And the on and off light switch to the eyes I like, but I wish that you could have swapped out an additional faceplate that had the eyes simulated as if they were already on. Other than that, it's a great looking figure and accompanies my R2 very nicely. If you guys are interested in picking this guy up for yourself, Spot will put the link down below to Sideshow Collectibles. And you can either pick this guy up in its entirety, or you can pay in installment plans as well until you finally get C3PO delivered to your door. Today's collectible spot, we were having a look at the Sideshow Collectibles, the Star Wars C3PO 6-scale figure. Stay tuned, guys. Spot's going to have more collectible spots heading your way. As always, thanks for watching. See you next time.